in fluid mechanics, when you start studying a flow, it's important that you ask yourself a few critical questions. And one of those is that of time dependency. To speak plainly, what we're asking ourselves here is, how long do I have to study this flow in order to describe it completely? It might be a critical question, but you're going to see answering it's really not difficult. Let's take a look at it together. Step one, when we start working with time dependency, is to erase turbulence away. And I mean this not in the sense of neglecting it or ignoring it, but more in the sense of like abstracting it away from the movement of the flow in order to focus on the underlying average flow pattern. Let me show you. So say we're studying the exhaust plumes from the chimneys of a factory here. And what we want to do here, in our minds at least, is to remove the turbulent component from this flow. And so to do this in our minds, we erase the turbulence away. So the flow just looks like this. We keep the main average structures, but the turbulent component of it is smoothed away. The second question to ask ourselves is, what is the best viewpoint to observe the flow? What is the reference frame, the vantage point from which we're going to describe the flow? Choosing a good one in fluid mechanics will save you a lot of time and effort. So it's definitely worth investing a little time at first to try to pick the best point of view. An important idea we have seen already in fluid mechanics is that the vantage point doesn't matter for the physics. So in the case of a cyclist, I could be sitting in the street while the cyclist zooms by and I measure the movement of the air as he passes by. Or I could be running along the cyclist with my instrument and measuring the air around him as he cycles in the street. Or I could just be sitting from the comfort of a wind tunnel measurement room in a chair, and the cyclist is stationary and it is the air which is being moved around him. All those flows have the same physics, they result in the same movement, but some of them are easier to observe than others. Here's an example of a flow that's difficult to describe from the stationary point of view. A boat passing on a river. I'm sure you can imagine that if you attach your reference point to the boat and you move along with it, the flow that you're going to describe is going to be much simpler and much clearer than if you just simply stay with the water and see the boat pass by. So an important piece of vocabulary then is the word steady flow. Steady flow means, very simply, a single picture is enough to describe the entire flow. I do not need to have this evolve with time. In only one image, I have a complete description of what is happening. Important to have in mind is that it is steady for us, the fluid dynamicists, not for the fluid. Yes? So imagine being a water particle and having the boat coming onto you, you're going to have a very unsteady experience. But if you observe the same thing from the point of view of the boat, you see the water pass by, you will observe a mostly steady flow. Well, this is a wind turbine seen from above. So in the case of this video, the wind enters from below the image and then leaves towards the top of it. This is a very unsteady flow, right? And you'll notice that if you stand next to the turbine and listen, just hearing this whoosh, whoosh, whoosh every time a blade passes. This is the wake shed by each blade passing along you. If you were tasked with improving the efficiency of this turbine by maybe just a few tenths of a percent, just still looking for a few million extra dollars every year, then you would be looking for a better point of view, because this is a very complex flow to describe all at once. And one great point of view to choose here would be that of a blade. So that in your mind you attach yourself to a blade and then you rotate along with it. So from your perspective now, the entire planet is rotating around you. Right? But what you encounter then is a relatively steady flow coming from the wind towards you with an almost steady angle. And the same thing for the outgoing flow. Of course, if you look too much into the details, you realize it's not quite true, right? Because the wind is stronger at altitude than it is near the ground, so that as you rotate, you'll encounter periodically like higher speed and lower speed and higher speed and lower speed. But even that variation is easier to describe than trying to describe the entire flow from the stationary point of view. So then, obviously by contrast to steady flow, we have unsteady flow. And the definition of an unsteady flow is very simple. You need a video to describe it. It changes all the time. There is no vantage point from which you can describe it with a steady image. In between those two states, steady and unsteady, there is this middle ground where we can still get away with a description of steady flow, and this is quasi-steady flow. Quasi-steady flow is flow that changes, but not fast enough for us to worry about it. To describe it now more formally, we say the time of residence is lower than the system response time. Makes us sound great, but it's essentially saying the same thing. Time of residence is the time a particle needs to go through the entire domain that you were interested in. And the system response time is typically the order of magnitude of time that you need to observe a change in the system. Well, let me give you an example. Say you're driving a car at 100 kilometers per hour, 60 mph, and you're slowing down. So the flow over the car is changing because you're slowing down, right? But you're slowing down at a rate that is relatively low. You're not hitting the brakes very violently. You're slowing down gently because you want to exit the motorway. Yes. From the point of view of the air now, is this a steady or unsteady flow? Yes, the flow is changing. The conditions overall are changing. Your speed is decreasing. But the air only needs about 1/10 of a second to pass over the entire car so that you can get away with a steady flow description of the airflow around the car, even though you're decelerating. Here's a video to illustrate. This is a fluid flow simulation of the atmosphere over Europe, where I live, and it's been generated by the Barcelona Supercomputing Center. In this video, we see in white the cloud coverage, and later on in the video, there's color added to stand for precipitation. The duration of the simulation is extremely long. 1 second in this video stands for 1 day in reality. And actually, you can see it. You can see pulses with a frequency of 1 second in the video on the cloud coverage. It's kind of interesting to look at. I'm showing this to you because we usually think of wind as something that is steady. If you look at wind over a wind turbine or passing over a building, for example, it is completely natural to say wind has constant conditions. But if you look at a volume that's large enough and over a time period that's large enough, then wind becomes a completely unsteady phenomena. So this is what we mean by quasi-steady. If your time frame and scale frame is small enough, then pretty much every flow can be steady. A final video that shows a good counterexample, a flow that's very difficult to describe with either a steady or quasi-steady approach. You ready? A diver entering the water. Completely unsteady flow. By the time her feet enter the water, the body velocity is much lower than when her hands first enter the water. Yes? So while describing this as a steady flow, so the constant velocity of water over the body, that would be a good maybe first approach to the problem. If you really want to understand the dynamics of the entrance of the human body into the water, you'll need to describe the entire flow for the entire duration. It's completely unsteady. Let's sum up then. You start studying a flow, one of the very first questions you should ask yourself is, how long do I need to study this flow in order to describe it well? And you can formulate the question like this. Turbulence notwithstanding, turbulence is always unsteady. What am I looking for when I describe the flow? Am I looking for an image? Then it's a steady flow. Or am I looking for a video? Then it's an unsteady flow. This is a good first look, I think, at the notion of steady versus unsteady flow. I hope you make good use of it, and I'll see you in the next video. Hi, I am Olivier Klein, and I'm recording a video course in fluid mechanics. If you find this video useful, check out the rest of them at learnfluidmechanics.com. I hope to see you there. Take care.